Hello everyone, we're back with round 6 of the Lebanese Chess Championship, and this was another exciting round, of course. And now the the tournament is getting all bunched up. The favorites are battling it out, and the up and coming youngsters are rising to the occasion. So let's see how this round proceeded. First, we have a big match here. We have Antoine against Amr, one of the two big names in Lebanese chess. Both multiple. Actually, Antoine may be only a two-time, and I say only in scare quotes, two-time Lebanese champion. Amr, I think this is. He already has 4 titles, I think. So. Yeah, let's see how this game proceeded. So both of them big favorites here. Let's see how they were able to neutralize each other in this rather timid draw, actually. So we got a very adventurous opening by Amr, the Scandi. So Amr has been actually also told me he's been straying away from his normal repertoire just so that he can avoid preparation. And this is exactly what he does here, playing the Scandi, but against someone like Antoine, the Scandi is a bit dangerous, so kudos to Amr. He knows his lines well, probably, definitely, to play the Scandi here. We get a normal Queen a5 Scandi, d4 is natural, Knight f6 is natural, Knight f3 is natural, Bishop f5 is natural. All of these moves are oh so natural, and now Knight e5 is a very precise move, aiming to get an advantage. It prepares g4, which will start attacking this light squared bishop and annoying it and basically forcing black to concede something in the position to escape losing immediately. And this also, of course, threatens the f7 square, where bishop c4 is a big threat, and if it's met with e6, at many points there are even d5 ideas. And of course, again, this g4 idea is very important to take note of. So, seeing this main opening, main option, Amr goes for c6, a natural option, also preventing any queen f3s, which would attack the b7 square. And now Antoine goes for bishop f4. I labeled this as interesting, but I see no reason not to go for the more standard bishop c4, which forces a very specific line wherein white has a very reasonable advantage, and this is actually the line I play. So if you want to get an advantage against the Queen a5 Scandinavian, this is the way to go, and I'll show you this line right now. So e6, defending f7, g4, as was mentioned, this is the main point behind knight e5, just trying. It might seem weakening, but this is justified because you're so far ahead, not so far ahead, but you're one piece ahead in development, or maybe you can consider this as 2, as it is a knight in the center. And yeah, this bishop doesn't have many good squares to go to, so it goes here. And now instead of capturing, which is a reasonable option, trying to win the bishop pair, here you even play h4, trying to completely trap the bishop. And here black obliges. They don't want to play h6 or h5, of course. Both of these moves would get met with this, and here you can even take or just play queen d3 and attack this square. So that's not possible, so knight b d7 instead, and here you take. Actually, you don't take like this, even though that's also possible, but the thing is you open up for this rook and the position isn't that advantageous for white. Instead, you actually take here. Note, by the way, that h5 here doesn't work because of takes. And then queen takes comes with check. So this doesn't work. So knight takes d7, knight takes, and now h5. Just kicking the bishop out. It only has this square. Thankfully, it's not going to get lost because of the pin. So it has this square, but now you castle, avoiding the pin, and now threatening the bishop. The only square it can go to is here. And here you just take the bishop, retreat. And yes, you're castled here, which might seem very strange, but black doesn't have enough firepower. Especially with the light squared bishop, you're very well defended. And this position is much better for white, and It's like you'll win a lot of games, I assume, because it's difficult for black to try to find their way here. The plans for black are not at all intuitive, while white has some reasonable plans, mostly connected with f4, f5, so very natural plans. So this was one way to go. Instead, Antoine went for bishop f4, which still retains an advantage, of course, but I don't like playing like this. So knight b d7, natural move, and now knight c4. This is basically the point. You want to just develop your bishop and put your knight here on a good square as well, and white should have an advantage. So queen d8, and now instead of playing the natural knight e3, which promises white a good advantage, Antoine started trading pieces, maybe signaling that he's happy with the draw, and here Amro obliged. Also, I assume being happy with the draw, because here he had the option to play on with bishop e6, as did Antoine, of course, with knight e3 previously. So they both traded here, and now knight d5, further piece trades, takes, not really necessary, bishop g3, tries to retain the advantage, tries to retain the initiative, and doesn't allow black to, well, it does, of course. Black is forcing the trade here, but that would be a trade which is kind of advantageous for white. So here you trade on your own terms, while here you're just improving black's pawn structure and just helping them trade. So this occurred. I'm sorry. Sorry for that yawn. And no, it wasn't because of the game. I can see now why it would be interpreted as such. Yeah, I mean, this is a very natural drop between two very strong players, so it's completely okay. And here Antoine agreed to a draw. Of course, white is slightly better because of these pawns, but I like taking a draw in this position. What I would more blame them for is reaching this position in the first place, like not taking the other options. But here taking the draw is completely fine, because it's very difficult to see how white will win, even though these pawns are bad. But yeah, this pawn majority isn't going to get rolling anytime soon, and this is a nice structure. So a draw between the two favorites. Let's move on with the game. Joe against Tarek. Now this wasn't, to be honest, the game, because Tarek just sacrificed a piece for no good reason. It looked maybe a bit appetizing, and Tarek is a super aggressive player, but Joe was up to the task. So let's take a look at the game rather quickly. So we get to see the Scandi, and here knight f6. See, I'm yawning already, so the previous yawn wasn't directed at the game. It's just a biological thing. Yeah, so we got to see this Scandinavian. This one is called the Portuguese variation. A dubious variation, to be honest, because exactly of what Joe played, which is the line that gives white a big advantage. Yeah, even David Smerdon, who wrote a book on the Scandinavian, and I encourage you to check it out. It's a good book. He mentions that this line basically is the refutation. The thing is, though, it's not easy to play for white, even if you know it. So yeah, black can look forward to muddying the waters at least, so as to not lose immediately. So g4, and now bishop d7, which isn't the most common. The most common is going bishop g6. Bishop d7 is slightly less optimal. And here the point is going c4, and after e6, not taking and allowing these kinds of sacrificial lines where like the king comes to d7 and then the rook comes to e8. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, just check out the game Magnus Carlsen. Just type Magnus Carlsen Portuguese variation and you'll know what I'm talking about. Instead, knight c3 here is the point, and now bishop b4, for example, doesn't work because of queen a4 check, and knight c6, of course, you just take. So black would lose a piece. And if e takes d5, just recapturing the pawn, now you have the brilliant g5. the knight moves, and now you can take the pawn freely. And if the knight moves here, you have this kind of plan where you try to basically trap the knight and win it, and black is ill-equipped to defend against that. Okay, so bishop g6 would have been a bit better, but instead he went bishop d7, c4 is natural, e6, and now he goes for queen b3, Joe does, which is a fine move, but yeah, I mean, of course white is still better, but more accurate was just taking, because now this kind of check doesn't really work because you have bishop d2, and the point is you're attacking two pieces at once. So if we see, for example, queen e7, I just take here, and this endgame is of course much better for white. White is up a pawn. Remember, this is the Portuguese variation, but it's basically a gambit. And after d takes e6, f takes e6, g5, you kick away the knight, and then you can come to b3, and you have a fine position. Instead, going for queen b3 immediately invites the next move, which is e takes d5, and Joe could have still retained something by playing this, and here you retain some sort of advantage, of course, the knight is sidelined. But he went for something very weird, which is just taking immediately, which just allows eventually some taking here, which just promises black a fine position. So this wasn't so accurate. So c takes d5. Instead, here now is the point where Tarek just throws the game basically. Knight takes d5. This just loses. No two ways about it. It's a clever piece sacrifice. Of course, it's very dynamic, very aggressive, trying to bring out the white king, but it just doesn't work. And from here on out, like, Joe basically does almost no errors and converts well. So instead, the way to stay in the game was c6, whereafter we would see the likely queen takes b7. Not necessarily taking the rook, which is a line we'll see, but of course now the rook is trapped, so knight a6 doesn't help, you just take. So the rook is trapped, so that's why c6 is given a brilliant, is given as being brilliant, because the rook is trapped, so you have to see how you escape. And basically you escape by trapping the queen in return if the rook is captured. Yeah, and the point of queen takes b7 isn't just to capture the rook, it's just to capture the pawn and kind of defend the center that way. So here after c takes d5, for example, we would see bishop b5, and which is a clever move, and I'll explain why in a second. And after bishop d6, this should be a fine position for white, but not something great here. Just a slight advantage. So c takes d5, and yeah, here, so what happens if you capture the rook, which is the logical follow-up? Here comes queen b6, and bishop c6 is the way to trap the queen and win the game. But here actually white has a few tricks of their own. Actually, sorry, I didn't explain bishop b5. So bishop b5, simply the point is you can take back, of course, if takes occurs. Yeah, so queen takes a8, and this is a bit dubious because it basically guarantees black a draw. So queen b6, and now the brilliant knight c3 though keeps white in the game. The point is that bishop c6, seemingly winning the queen, loses to bishop b5. And now if bishop takes b5, you have bishop f4, and taking here is coming. And when the queen escapes, you're just up in exchange, and white should be winning. And after knight c3, if the better bishop b4 is tried, which I should promote. Yeah, so if bishop b4 is tried here, you go g5, just kicking the knight out, and black here will castle, aiming to simply win the queen. So whoops. So g takes f6, you win the knight. Here of course black sacrificed the knight, but after bishop c6 they win the queen, and here you take a piece, and here you have two minor pieces and the rook for the queen, but the king is so open that after knight e2 I would slightly favor black. It seems to me an easier position to play for black, just because of the king safety, but probably technically speaking even white has a slight advantage. But yeah, I mean, it's here and there. I'm not sure what the engine would say about this position. Yeah, so that was the best way after c takes d5 to play c6. Instead, Tarek went for knight takes d5, and the point of this is to drag out the king. So these two checks force the king to go to d1. So here you could block the check, and Joe did, but now you can't anymore block this check, so you have to go here. And the argument is that you castle quickly as black, and this king is in a bad spot. But it turns out white has adequate resources to defend, and that's exactly what Joe did. So bishop takes d2, knight takes d2, knight c6. And now queen e4 check would have been a very nice move. The point is to get the queen out of the way of any eventual rook d8s, and to try to trade the queen off on e1. So that would have been a good move. Instead, Joe played knight h3, which is reasonable. The point is that after castles, which is what Tarek played, you have queen g5. So that's a nice point behind knight h3. And after queen h5, queen g5, of course you're trading queens, and this should just be winning for white, because now black doesn't even have an attack to justify this piece sacrifice. But actually the problem with knight h3 is seen after f5. Brilliant move. What's the point? What could be the point? Nothing more than blocking this queen g5. So for example, if you play g takes f5, just simply winning a pawn. Here comes castles, and actually black is slightly better, even though they're down a piece, because now you can't trade queens, and you get to see the full frontal assault that white will be under. So instead here you have to go queen c4, preempting this kind of castling on the queen side, and here white would still be better. So knight h3 doesn't blow away the advantage completely, but after f5, white would have had some tough questions to answer. Instead, castles just allows a queen trade, and here Joe shows exemplary technique. Note that this is here, so knight takes d4 is not possible, so this is protected, and now knight b3. And Tarek doesn't want to trade more pieces. All of that would help Joe. Let's go through these a bit more quickly. Here bishop g2 is a bit strange, allowing bishop rook c4 check. Bishop e2 is fine. He might have been afraid of something like this, but this is of course still losing. You're up in exchange as white, so this is nothing to fear. Okay, so let's go through these moves quickly. So all of this is fine, Maybe there are some better moves engine-wise, but white never really blows away the advantage. Just going through the game, so basically here he even comes up. Now of course black is just completely lost. And here he even comes up with a cute trick, Joe does, to just sacrifice the queenside pawns and just win like this. The a pawn is unstoppable because there's a knight, so stalemate tricks never work. So white is just winning here. Pick up these two pawns, promote with the help of the knight, and that's it. So a bit of a shame Tarek went for this line against Joe. I mean, if there is one person who can calculate well and defend well and refute openings, it's Joe. So tough luck to Tarek here. We didn't get to see his brand of aggression, and Joe is an aggressive player as well, so this was promising to be a very nice fight, but Tarek was too speculative with this sacrifice. But yeah, it happens. What's up next? Yeah, this one. Yeah, this game saw an early blunder by Ralph, and Akram did not. He made use of it, but yeah, okay. Let's just see what happened. So we have a normal Catalano. This is the most standard of the Catalanos. Catalan. C6 is a fine move, of course, but a bit like you need to know what you're doing so as to not be worse. And here actually Ralph B6 is still fine. Here Ralph blunders a bit. Knight e5 is played here, which is apparently the best move. I mean, or most played move by grandmasters. But I really like, instead of putting the knight here, which seems okay, you're putting it in the center, but here I'm afraid of these knight bd7 ideas, which don't work out tactically speaking for now, but later on they do. So instead I prefer knight d2, aiming to prepare e4. And when I play the Catalan, actually I do employ this knight d2. So yeah, I would have preferred that. Okay, but follows mainline theory with knight e5. Bishop b7 is natural. E4, very natural, just being able to push the pawn. And now knight bd7, which loses. Which just loses a pawn. Instead here d takes c4 was the better try. And here I included a very long line, which has never been seen before, surprisingly, even though it looks so forced. But I thought I'd include it just to see like how what White's possibilities are. Already here, like this variation with b6, bishop b7, it's a bit too optimistic, trying to develop all of your pieces as black. But you're simply not able to. So so instead, yeah, what did I want to say? Oh yeah, so yeah, after this line you get to see why White has a slight pull, but it's very forced, and so that's surprising why it has never been played. So knight takes c4 and bishop a6, natural, right? Pinning. B3, protecting, b5, still pinning, and now knight e2 is the only way to preserve the rook. But here you win the pawn, but now you get a nice initiative going as White. You keep attacking the queen, and eventually here you take to be able to put the knight here at some point and just get some nice pressure. White is down a pawn, but White of course is the better side because it's difficult to see how black will develop. This could come at any moment. This here, this here. So White is better here. But d takes c4 was like, as you see by this line, it at least promises black some, like an extra pawn. So it would have kept black in the game. Instead, knight bd7 is just a blunder, and this is the reason. Knight takes c6, played by Akram. Bishop takes, and now taking here. And after taking bishop b7, here comes the brilliant d6. So White still hasn't recovered their piece, but now they do. Taking, note that if takes, I didn't include this, but obviously this. And here, here White is just up a pawn. And if takes, here you take, and you're forking these two. So big fork here. So taking is what occurs. And here you take, and you're simply up a pawn. A nice central pawn to boot. The d4 pawn which started the game. So yeah, very difficult tactic to see by like as the defending side. As White, it makes more sense to swap this tactic, especially you're looking for some possibilities. But still a brilliant spot by Akram. So he knows these sacrifices from other similar lines, I think. Actually, I haven't asked him. I can't remember any of these lines in the Catalan off the top of my head, but I imagine there are, right? Knight bd7, knight c6, but I bet he didn't see this precise one, but yeah, maybe he can, if he's watching, if he'll watch this video, maybe he can post in the comments. So rook f8, natural, queen f3, natural, rook a8, natural, just natural developing moves, and now bishop f4. Which blunders away the game. Here you have to play rook d1 to protect the pawn, and then you can play bishop f4. Bishop f4 and hello. Queen b4. Good morning, Akram. Hitting the two pawns. So after all of that brilliant tactic, he has to lose a pawn back. So b3, queen takes d4. White is still better though, because he controls the board more. But with this king also maybe some weaknesses. So, and actually this was kind of Akram's downfall later on. So knight b5, queen b2, queen b2. And now knight takes a7 is a bit too greedy. Just rook fb1 and continuing to play the game from there. Maybe knight c3 back. Maybe knight a3, knight c4. I mean, knight c4, knight d6. Or knight d6 immediately, of course. Something like that. Just try to play on. Because here the problem is after knight takes a7, rook a8, which is what occurred. Now, queen b7 was played, which is basically a game-losing blunder. Now if you go knight b5, there's rook takes a2, takes, and I don't get why white should be better. Black has control over the a file, and yeah, seems about equal. Instead, rook queen b7. So instead of playing knight b5, he tries to go for more, not wanting to give up the a pawn. But this is just wrong. So after knight c5, attacking the queen, now we get to see that white has a lot of problems. Connected with this, connected with this, connected with this, connected with this. So queen takes b6 is tried, and here they agreed to withdraw. And this is the smartest decision, I think, by Akram, better than the sacrifice he pulled off, which is suggesting offering a draw, and Ralph accepting, of course, seeing as how he was outrated. But Ralph has fighting spirit. I'm a bit surprised he went for the draw. Maybe he didn't see the advantages of his position. And the coming lines we'll see aren't easy at all to spot. But yeah, he should have played on, basically. So knight d3 is what would have been so good, attacking this and attacking this. And here bishop e3 would be losing, for example, and it seems like a natural move. The reason being knight d5 and GG. And if not bishop e3, something more, let's promote this variation actually, something more up to the task, which is knight c6. Here comes knight takes f4 check. So yeah, the bishop is attacked and you can't really move it anywhere because of knight d5 and knight e4. So you're forced to play knight c6 and give up the bishop. And here comes knight d5, hitting the queen and hitting f4. So you try to defend it and trade off the queens. But what's also coming is something else, which is knight e3. And see the problem? So here you have to move out. Let's go through this slowly. King g1, queen takes, knight takes, takes, and you enter into this endgame. White should be able to draw, but it's not going to be fun probably. I mean, with the past a and b pawns, maybe it's a bit fun. But yeah, in principle, this is how it should have continued. And here at least, like, black shouldn't lose, right? So maybe Ralph calculated this line and went for it. I mean, he thought he didn't have any winning chances, but okay. So let's move on. So already 3 games. The games here were a bit shorter than usual. Now we get to see Mahmoud Abdulaziz against Salman. So we have in normal English, or relatively normal English, and now it gets spicy with h5. I'm getting some deja vu, guys. Maybe you guys remember on the channel. I think I covered also a Samer game. I think it was in the Adnan Hariri Rapid Cup, right? I think so. That is where I saw Samer employing the same system against Abdulaziz and also beating Abdulaziz. I believe so. Anyway, so here Abdulaziz plays d4, which is slightly inaccurate because it allows h4. Instead, you have to prevent h4 by playing h4 yourself. So d4 allows h4, d5, and now knight c e7. Trying a bit much to play it like a King's Indian. This move shouldn't be too bad, but knight b8 is much preferred because you have knight a6 knight c5 ideas, a5, and this is like this is more in tune with the position. Knight ce7, I mean, it's difficult to explain why this is the case. Of course, it'll require just playing out the game with knight ce7 and then playing the game with knight b8 and seeing the difference. And this is a difference that's basically arises out of feel. So, out of feel. Okay, I realized the way I pronounced that maybe it sounded like something else. Anyway, e4, defending, and yeah, seems like a natural move, trying to prevent f5 or at least mitigate its effects, not really prevent. h3, of course, very smart actually. I like it. It seemingly closes down the position, so maybe not so desirable, but actually it has a very smart point, which is to really put the squeeze in terms of kingside space, put the squeeze on white's pieces. So now the bishop is forced to go to f3, or compelled to go to f3. Actually, it should have been forced to go to f1, where yes, undeveloping looks bad, but remember this is a super closed position. So development is not that important. What's more important is piece placement, and putting the bishop here, as it turns out, runs into many tactical problemos, which is what happened in the game. So bishop f3, and Samer is smartly playing the natural f5. Let's go through these. I hate this double clicking with the mouse. So queen d3, knight f6. All of these moves are natural. Castling is maybe a bit optimistic, but fine, because of course the structure on the king side is closed. No attack will be forthcoming, and black smartly castling, realizing that there is no need to keep the rook on h8. b4, natural, gaining space on the queen side. a5, natural response to b4, just kind of chipping away at the structure, because a3 is not possible because of this standard tactic. So a3 takes, and you can't take back because of this. And this forces basically b5, which is undesirable, at least from a theoretical point of view, because you're closing down the queen side, and black is going to try to attack you on the king side, so that doesn't seem very nice. But actually it doesn't. Of course, here, for example, black can play b6 and like lock out your potential to play any c5 break. But in turn, if for example they respond immediately here with b6, trying to stop you from playing c5 even as a pawn sacrifice, you can even think about just moving the rook out of the way and just getting your king to safety, because after b6 the queen side will be forever closed, and apart from some kind of sacrifices or whatever, or some c6 sacrificial ideas, white should be safe there. So yeah, I mean, seems difficult to play, but it is what should have been played. And b5 is just necessary, basically keeping the position with rook b1 open. This isn't favoring white. Like, in principle, you're keeping the queen side open, okay, that should be fine, but this isn't about principles here, it's about concrete play. And if you look at it concretely, how is white going to make use of the queen side at any moment? Any pressure on the b file can simply be met by b6, which is a desirable move and what black wants to play for, and otherwise doesn't make a lot of sense. So so here we just continue a bit. All of these moves are natural and follow certain plans. The knight relocates to c5. The queen tries to activate by going to e8. The bishop gets out of the way of the rook. King h8, getting out of the way of any future diagonal pressure, maybe here. Yeah, just a waiting move, basically, to be honest. Knight g8. Oh, sorry, of course. King h8 is paving the way for knight g8. Yeah, I mean, all of this is just natural. I need to stop. Why does this keep double clicking? b6, as we said, is natural to cement the queen side. Knight b5, trying to go for a forcarino. That is defended. Maybe queen f7 was more interesting, more natural, even though, okay, you're here, but the rook is unprotected, so lining up with the rook is fine. Takes, and now f4. Alright, all of these moves make a lot of sense. And now is where white starts going astray, and black also a bit. First of all with knight e4, which is a very strange move, just knight f6, trying to go for the e4 square on force. Here with the knight e4, you're just inviting taking. And this bishop is terrible. I get there are light square weaknesses, which you are trying to avoid, but this is necessary. And yeah, here after, let's say, rook b, b1, now you're threatening to take, for example, on e5. And take here, make use of that. Let's keep this arrow actually. And you have the possibility of going bishop g5, and maybe some positions knight d4, knight c3, taking on e4. All of these are good options. Instead he went for queen c2, which is rather strange. I get that he doesn't want to give up the light square bishop, but getting rid of this powerful knight was something very desirable. So knight g f6, which seems like a natural move. Now finally protect, so that if takes, you get to take with a knight. But actually here knight h6 was actually very slightly better, because you have access to the g4 square and are able to create some of these threats at some point. But mainly it's about g4 and attacking this bishop, which has no useful squares. And if it goes away, then you have to contend with some of these ideas at some point. So he played knight gf6 instead. Not a super bad move though, not a bad move to be honest, just slightly inaccurate. And now I double click. Bishop c1, I guess preempting knight g4, but this was not at all necessary. I mean, you should preempt g4, but by playing bishop f3, so that you at least activate your piece. So if you think about it philosophically, here there are two ways to meet knight g4, right? Either bishop f3, activating your weak piece and stopping knight g4 that way, or you could meet it by playing bishop c1 and undeveloping one of your active pieces, and now you're left with two inactive pieces, versus in that other line you could have had two active pieces. I said two. two active pieces. So yeah, that's why this is a wrong move, bishop c1, and it gives black a big advantage. But black doesn't take advantage of that and plays bishop a6, which allows rook b3, which keeps the game safe and solid and eyes the pawn. Instead of bishop a6, black should have tried c6, opening up the position. The point is that after knight bc3, for example, takes, and now e4 comes, and knight g4, bishop d4 check. And see, that's the problem with bishop e3. If the bishop were on f3, for example, you could move to e2, and with the bishop on e3, you never are afraid of bishop d4 check, and with the bishop on f3, you never are afraid of knight g4. So yeah, that's what was possible. And now here black is of course basically winning because of this earlier error. So c6, opening up the position, striking while the iron was hot, was warranted. Instead bishop a6, knight c3, which is the final mistake basically. Rook b3 needed to be played. Knight bc3 basically loses a pawn, and we'll see how in a moment. Actually no, that comes later. He loses a pawn later. No, the problem here is that you allow the same knight g4 e4 idea. So takes, and now e4 and knight g4, bishop d4 is coming. Instead he went for knight g4 immediately, which allows bishop f3. Now it's much less effective, because with e4 you have bishop d4 check. E takes f4 was tried. Bishop takes f4. Here you had to play knight e2 just to prevent the bishop from coming to d4 at the expense of losing a pawn, of course, but this pawn isn't so problematic to lose, and at least you get some open files for it. Instead, he went for bishop takes f4, and this was almost the last error. Bishop d4 check, king h1, king h1, queen g7, attacking the knight. Knight d1. More active was knight e2, and at least attacks the bishop. Instead, he went a bit passively with knight d1. Now knight e2, of course, you have to be afraid of this, but it turns out there isn't anything really special here. You can just move here, and nothing much is going on. Actually, let me make sure of that, because it might be that you have to take let's think here. So is it that you can play king g1 safely, or you have to take rook takes f2? Actually, I don't know. I think this is it though. Is there anything clear to win a piece here? No. Wait, knight d3 just picks up the rook. What am I talking about? Yeah, sorry guys, this is what happens when you're stupid. So here you have to take. Yeah, you have to take. Takes. And yeah, okay. So the point is that after this, takes, you have this. So this is maybe a slightly better way to defend. Let's turn off the engine. Instead, knight d1 loses a pawn eventually. So bishop c5, and now this loses a pawn with the c4 is hanging. Instead, he should have tried rook a4 and tried to keep the pawn. That way. Yeah, that was the only way to keep the pawn. Else black would lose. Else white would lose. I mean, he's very worse off here, but maybe not losing. But after rook b3, the pawn is just hanging after the brilliant queen d4, which Samer finds. And here he tries to defend, but rook e8 is also smart, trying to sacrifice. Like here, rook takes e2 is threatened with a monster skewer / fork. So taking, and now this is a nice intermezzo. The point being that if you move the bishop away, I just take the rook, and this is actually what happened. No, he didn't even move the bishop, okay. So moves up the rook, and now mate is coming. Actually, why was mate not? Oh. Yeah, okay. I mean, analyzing some of these games like 2-3 days ago, I realized that when I do the video, I completely forget the point, like the essence behind the game, right? Of course, it's pinned. But here after bishop g2 check, this is game over because of this. So actually, a nice piece of calculation by Samer here to spot that bishop b2 actually still loses because of takes, and now you seemingly win the queen, but hello, you're forced, your king has no squares, so you're forced to sacrifice the queen back. And thereafter, if we continue this line, you have this check, you pick up this, and now there will be no more pin, and black will just be winning, even getting to retain their queen. Yeah, so very nice game by Samer. Abdulaziz, I think his mistake basically was not playing h4 in the opening. From that moment on, he had to defend just a worse off position, and it did not work out well for him. And again, I saw Samer beating Abdulaziz in the same way a year or two ago prior, I think a year ago in the Adnan Hariri Rapid Championship, which I covered on my channel as well. So yeah, bad idea there. Okay, next up we have a very interesting game by Mahdi against Nadim. Nadim playing in rather swashbuckling fashion, and Mahdi playing rather well actually in this game, very well actually. So we get to see also another English. Mahdi and Abdulaziz are they're the basically, I mean, I was going to say the two best players who play the English, but they're also like the only two players who play the English. Of course, they're super strong players, but I don't even know people on the lower level who play the English as often. That makes sense, of course. The English isn't really an opening for people under 2,000, probably. Yeah. Okay, so we get to see a reverse Grand Prix with this. Hello, this is something I play. Bishop g2, knight f6, and now a3 is a bit... It's a bit clever, trying to stop bishop b4, but it's a bit slow as well. Instead, just more natural is d3. Okay, but he plays a3, and now Nadim goes for some queenside space. a3, knight g2, g6, g6, bishop g7 is one of the best ways to play this system as black. Probably objectively. So all of this is fine. Castles, castles, d3, all very normal moves. And now king h8, trying to get away from the diagonal, but it wasn't really necessary. Just play d6 and try to develop. Okay, king h8 is reasonable. Rook b1, preparing b4, knight e7, preparing d5, and trying to get the knight into the game so that it might join in on the attack. Black, of course, hopes to try to stir up some kind of attack, or at least kingside expansion. But Mahdi prevents that. Very interesting move f4, trying to prevent kingside expansion. And now we have d6, normal development. b4, gaining space on the queen side. Instead, maybe trying to play it slowly with queen d2, b3, bishop b2. Maybe that was a bit better, but of course b4 just opening up the position quickly is fine. h6, b5, just keep pushing on the queen side. And now g5, aggressively opening up the king side, but maybe you should have tried to slow it down a bit with c6, which seems counterintuitive because you're just inviting taking and opening up the bishop, but it's a good way to also retain white's forces on the queen side, because there aren't really that many possibilities. So if you imagine this d5 first of all is a big possibility as well, so that's one of the main points of c6. But also, like, on the queen side, like, how is white going to add pressure? Queen a4 isn't possible, rook b6 isn't possible. So yeah, you open up for white, which seems dangerous, but black also doesn't have, white doesn't have any good way to exploit that. So instead, though, he went for g5, bishop b2, knight g6, bishop b2 very natural, knight g6 very natural, queen d2 very natural, all developing moves. And now rook e8, a bit strange why you'd take away the rook from the e file. I get you want to try to defend the center more, but just playing something like king h7, getting out of any tactical possibilities later on, connected with the g6 square, and simply defending the knight as well, and just waiting a bit. This seemed like the better option. Instead he went rook e8. I mean, even king h7, like maybe even like queen e7, something else than rook e8. Yeah, but okay, let's not be too harsh on rook e8. It's not such a bad move. But now Mahdi goes for the opening up the position, and it's very timely, very well timed. e4, opening up the position when you have everything so well developed. Look at the queen also; it's in a good spot, and the bishops. They're both on the long diagonals. You have the knight, so everything is well placed. So you have to strike, especially when black isn't developed even, isn't fully developed. So g takes f4, and now e takes f5. Inviting the bishop to develop is strange. Maybe just g takes f4. If takes, then you can take like this, and you want black to try to stir up trouble, right? You don't want you yourself to help black stir up trouble by allowing the bishop to develop. But yeah, okay, e takes f5, a dubious decision, but white should still be fine. Bishop takes, g takes f4, And now, a tragic blunder by Nadim. I mean, Nadim throughout this tournament, it's very disappointing to see because I just first of all I can't believe he's rated 1800. He's much stronger than that, and in this tournament he's just making these one move blunders that drop something big. Like if you remember his game against Amr in the first or second round, I think it was the second. No, don't quite remember. But yeah, that was very tragic the way he went down there, and here he just opens up the position for Mahdi's pieces and allows some knight g3 ideas against the bishop, and this is basically lost. Instead he should have played queen c8, defending the bishop, defending the pawn here, and going from there. e4 just... okay, I get you're trying to block the bishop, but it's not enough. And here Mahdi goes for d takes e4. Here Mahdi plays an optimal way to win. Knight takes, takes, takes. And now f5, which is very interesting, trying to go for f6. Bishop takes, rook takes e4, and knight g3 were also... and f5 kind of ideas was also possible. But yeah, instead of d takes e4 here, which still wins, as we will see how Mahdi won. But immediately going for knight takes e4 is more forcing and better. So that after bishop takes, for example, you take, and if takes here, you take, if takes here. Remember, any point this comes, you take with check, and it's very annoying for black. So knight g3. And here, maybe black takes the pawn, but you take here and play knight h5, queen check, threatening mate. So the knight has to give itself up, and you can just add pressure to the knight. You can of course take, but adding pressure is even better. And yeah, white is completely winning here. Yeah, so knight takes e4 was more direct. Instead d takes e4, takes, takes, takes. Now f5, queen g5, takes, takes, rook here, and now you're going to win this. Takes. And yeah, here you're basically losing a piece due to the tactics, this knight being hanging. But I'm not sure like there's much better than this, because f6 also is coming, and yeah, this is just a disaster for black. So takes. And yeah, actually he even falls for a mate, so this and this is mate. You can't capture because of this. Yeah. tough game for Nadim. And I love his spirit, you know, like playing the reverse Grand Prix, which is something I play. He played it very nicely, kept going for the initiative. Knight g6 was a nice maneuver, for example, knight e7, knight g6. But yeah, it was not meant to be, and Mahdi is playing reasonably in this tournament. Maybe not his best form, but had some nice games in the tournament. So tough to see Nadim losing like this. But yeah, it happens. So yeah, oh actually yeah, I think this was the fifth game. Yeah, that was. So this was the fifth game, and basically that's it. So let's see the results actually. As always, you have to see me struggling to fix stuff in OBS. What? What's happening? Come on. What? Okay. Yeah, so we have no one on a full score. This is round 6, and we have the highest scorer is R, Amr and Joe. Joe on 5 out of 6, Amr on 5 out of 6, Kassis on 5 out of 6. So these are the top 3 scorers. We have Tarek on 4, Ralph on 4.5, very impressive result. Ralph is not 1700 by the way, guys, he's much stronger, as was seen on the tournament. Akram on 4, Abdulaziz on 3.5, Samir on 4.5. Oh, actually, Ralph and Samer on 4.5. Impressive. Also Samer, a rising young talent. Nadim unfortunately on 3.5. Mahdi on 4.5 also. Impressive. Adib on 4.5 as well. He beat Mahmoud Masarani. Gion 4.5. He beat Imad. We actually have a lot of 4.5s. Khalid also. Faisal on 4. Okay, so here basically. So yeah, a lot of people on 4.5, and the 3 tournament leaders remain. Not remain actually. Have become Joe, Assis, and Amr. So yeah, without. Not without further ado, but yeah, we'll see how well they do in the 7th round. And on that note, yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying this coverage, and we'll see you on the 7th round. Alright guys, take care. Actually, before let me fix it since we're here, right? And you'll have to bear with me in trying to fix this. Alright, I think I put it like this usually, right? Yeah, and we have it here. Yeah, with that, take care guys. Alright, cheers.